And we are live. This is Live with Sondra, and I'm your host, Sondra Shannon, CEO of Gatemaster Technology. And I told you guys this summer we were going to have an incredible lineup of guests, and this next guest will not disappoint. We're going to be talking today about experience excellence, innovating guest interactions and in attractions. And why I am super excited about this conversation is that I have the pleasure of speaking today to Dave Mugnaini, an expert in the attractions industry with a wealth of experience in guest recovery strategies. Pretty cool, huh? The thing I love about guest recovery strategies is even in the work that I do in the industry, this is a real place where people need ideas and strategies, and it has to come from people who have this knowledge that have been here before in the industry. And what I love about what we're going to talk about today is also how to empower your team with these strategies, how to develop your talent with these strategies, the technology integration that can be used to help support your team with these strategies, and then understanding the impact that having these strategies has on your attraction. So without further ado, if you guys can give a warm welcome to my next guest, I'd like to introduce you to Dave Mugnaini. Dave, welcome to the show.
Hey, Sondra, how are you doing today? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing great. Thank you for being here. And I'm really excited about this topic because, as I said in the intro before, I think guest centric recovery strategies and empowering your team with tools and knowing what to do is such an important part of what we do, and sometimes even overlooked, because until we run into the problem, sometimes we're not even thinking about it. So I'm super excited to talk to you. But first, would you mind giving our audience a brief introduction to who you are and what you do, and maybe even what got you into attractions? I love asking people how they got here.
Yeah, of course. So, my name is Dave Mugnaini, and I have worked in the hospitality industry for about 20 years of my career, specifically in theme park operations management. So, I spent a large portion of my career at Universal Orlando, overseeing the guest services operations and the attractions operations in the assistant manager role. Prior to that, I worked for the Walt Disney World Resort, and I also worked for SeaWorld Adventure Park here in Orlando, again, in various facets of operations. I also had the opportunity to open up the Hard Rock Park, which was a short lived theme park in Myrtle Beach back in 2008. I've loved theme parks since I was a kid. I love the rides. I love the feeling, and I really love the memories and the experiences that I got there when I spent time with my family and my friends at them. So as I started to explore careers right around like the high school, college age, I was living in Orlando, and I found that hospitality was really the route that I wanted to go. So I started working in hotels and working my way up in theme parks, and really fell in love not only with the environment, but really the guest experience aspect and the service aspect, just having those impacts on guest vacations, whether it was just helping them continue on an experience that was, an enjoyable one, or resolving concerns and problems or conflicts that they may have had on their trip. It stuck with me, those memories that we created for them. And that's really just kind of how it all, springboarded into a career and really kind of fell into a passion project, if you will.
Yeah, I love it. And I love hearing these stories about how we end up here. Because oftentimes it's either you just started with a job. I can't tell you how many operators I work with that were ride operators and now they're managing attractions, some even executives in the attractions that they're working for many years later. But even myself, we were, I don't know if you knew this, I started with QZAR, laser tag, back in the late 90s. Actually quit school to play laser tag because I loved it so much, and I got this job. And my family was disappointed in me that I quit school to go run a family entertainment center, but it ended up turning into an amazing career, and I really just followed my passion and love for, like what you said, the experiences that we can provide for family, friends, and people who are attending and visiting these attractions. And what a cool professional journey that you've been on, both with Universal, Disney, and the Hard Rock.
Yes, it's been a lot of fun, a lot of great memories, met a lot of great people along the way, and stories for a lifetime for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm really excited to talk about this particular topic because we're right smack dab in the middle of the season for many of the attractions and parks that we work with, and even those that are just watching this show. And what I think is going to be most helpful for them, and if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to pick your brain about something.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
What is, because the topic for today is really focusing on guest recovery strategies, conflict resolution, and how we can innovate that guest interaction, right? And one of the things that I think would be helpful for the audience today is to understand, what is, can you give us some examples of why a park would need a guest recovery strategy? What are those moments that require something like that? What are those operators or attendees or attendants bumping up against in the event that they need a strategy?
Yeah, so I think it's important to have a strategy around, typical or common situations, maybe a refund for a partial purchase or for an entire day experience, recovery for a meal that may have been cold, simple things like that. But I really think when you start looking at the strategy that you have to develop, you really have to be ready for everything, every type of scenario. What happens if our entire power goes out, and not only can the guests not experience what they need, but we can't access the tools and resources that we have to provide them a refund or to provide that recovery? Should there be an act of God that occurs outside of our control? What's our crisis management process to recover that scenario? So as you start looking at it, it really becomes a much broader scope than you can even develop, because if you come up with a specific recovery or a specific example for every scenario, one, you're going to have a process that you're going to have to train your team that's going to take months and months, because you're going to have to cover every single variable that comes into play. So it really comes down to building that mindset of recovery, right? And what our
Ah,
mission is in terms of providing that recovery. If I know that, for example, one of my previous teams, I called them the vanilla ice of the resort, because if the guest had a problem, we'd solve it. If I know what my mission is, and I know what my role is in the organization, then I'm able to tackle anything that comes my way. So whether it is a guest that got evacuated off of one ride and they're totally comfortable with it because they love experiencing rides and seeing the behind the scenes stuff, or if it's a guest that got evac'd off this ride, was evacuated off of 3 previous rides, had a poor meal experience, their child didn't meet the height requirement, even though it was posted online, they have a number of different concerns. My team or your team is going to be able to know how to resolve that effectively, regardless of what comes their way. So it's important for us to get into the mindset of recovery, because, again, like you mentioned, we're in the business of memories, right? Our product is intangible. They might touch the controllers and joysticks at our arcade, or they may touch the restraints on our ride vehicles. But really, what guests are coming to when they come to our attraction is that experience, that intangibility of it. So by making sure that we can provide that experience and that recovery for that moment, that memory, and that they have the skill sets to do that, it allows us to make sure that we're delivering on it and protecting our brand representation, because it allows us to make sure that we're delivering a consistent product time and time again.
yeah. No, I love that. And I have to say, I actually sat next to Vanilla Ice on an
Really?
airplane flying to Florida years ago.
Really?
Yeah, years ago. So it's funny. So and I love that. I love that you called them the Vanilla Ice team, because it is about solving problems at times that maybe the guest is having. One situation that we bumped up against this year is, we over here at Gatemaster work with a lot of the city and state facilities, so a lot of rec centers. And what we're finding is that, and this is just one scenario, in certain socioeconomic groups, we're going to have higher rates of declines on debit and credit cards, especially as more and more parks move to cashless, right?
Absolutely.
And one of the issues that we're finding is that the and I'm sharing this example because I'm hoping you can maybe speak to this. But one of the things that we're finding is happening is the staff is super uncomfortable asking for another form of payment. And as you know, that's not something that's in their control.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's not even in the guest's control. Here they are, they're standing there with their families. They don't want to be told that their card was declined for whatever reason, right? But declines often happen because of that's between them and their bank, right?
Mhm.
But it was interesting because one of our calls that came in this year that we had to support a park through was, how do we develop a strategy for when this is happening? Because we do know that, like I said, in some of these economic groups, you can see as high as a 40% decline rate. So as we start moving more towards cashless, and I'm sure you're familiar, a lot of even our park here at Elitch's just went completely here in Denver, completely cashless. So, there are going to be those customers that are upset about this. And so my question is, what's a way that you would solve something like that? What kind of tool would you give to your team in that situation? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but
No,
I think you might be the guy to help solve this.
it's tough, right? Because we want to help every guest that comes up. At the same time, we do have our financial obligations and our financial commitments that we need to meet, which does include selling our product for the fair and reasonable price that we have set. So I can't necessarily say that a free admission into the park for them or their party would be the right option. Maybe there's a concern where they have to work with the credit card company. Maybe there was a fraudulent charge or some identity theft concern on their card that might be holding up some of the funds or anything like
Sure.
that. Maybe we give them the opportunity to talk with their bank, give them the opportunity to come up, purchase the ticket, should that be the concern. And I can assist with making up for some of the time, because even though it's not our organization's fault, ultimately the day's experience, you're still with us. So we want to make it as good as possible. So maybe I assist with getting you some expedited access onto an attraction later on. Maybe it's a concern where there's, again, I don't want to say identity theft, but maybe there's a concern related to a partial charge that doesn't line up for that guest or that individual. Maybe we can look at providing a nominal discount off of the product. So maybe we can look at, okay, now that you were able to get this concern, or you had to wait for another member of your party to arrive 2 hours later with the card and the funds. Okay, maybe we can look at arranging, again, some expedited attractions access, maybe look at a private meet and greet. If I can make the connection and see you're wearing a t-shirt that has the park's favorite character on it, and I can tell you're excited to meet them, maybe we look at creating that wow moment for you. So it kind of comes to being creative in the moment with certain situations. And unfortunately, too, there are going to be times where I can't necessarily compensate, or anyone can't necessarily compensate or provide that for the guest. But we still need to be respectful in how we deliver that
Yes.
information, because tact, decorum, and respect really comes into play with service, and ultimately showing respect and sensitivity in that situation.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it is quite a sensitive situation. And I appreciate you taking a moment just to speak to that, because, being in the transactions, with transaction strategies being the majority of what we deal with, we are seeing, as parks move to this cashless environment more and more, things like that become a concern. And then also becomes something that parks have to have a strategy around, because as you're saying, not only do you have to do it with tact, but also you have to give the customer their dignity in the event that
Absolutely.
it is a financial issue. It could just be, and I mean, I fly all the time, so it could
Mm-hmm.
be, like you said, it could be that my cards get flagged all the time. I was in Canada last week, and then the next day I'm in California.
Yep.
Believe me, my bank's constantly calling me as I'm on the road. So, sometimes we're just dealing with that situation, and that might be that the guest just needs to call their bank, right? So
Yep.
you
It,
can
it could
then,
even be like a hotel deposit or a hotel credit.
right. No, that was such a great answer, and I really appreciate it.
Oh.
You know, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but you seem like the guy who might be able to help with some of these things.
I'll try. I'll
Um,
try.
so in addition to that, because we're talking about these strategies, what are I'm trying to think of how I want to say this question. What are some of the effective conflict resolution techniques that attractions can implement to turn negative experiences into the positive ones? I know that you just gave us one for that example, but you said it's a mindset. So I'm wondering, how do we develop that mindset while still accomplishing that?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I think you win any conflict resolution service strategy by starting it effectively before that guest even comes in with an effective onboarding and training process.
Yeah.
When we looked at our training in some of my previous areas, because training is also an area near and dear to my heart, we were able to effectively look at breaking up our training, by first teaching our team what we do, what we can do, and what our overall goal is. Then we looked at, okay, now that you know what we can do, we are guest services, we can provide all the different compensation that we need. I'm going to show you how to do it. How do we refund our tickets? How do we document the guest concerns? And then from there, really teaching the why behind that, really teaching, okay, why are we going to assist this guest and maybe go above and beyond what their initial concern was. If they had a concern with a long wait time due to a downtime where they were stuck on a ride, why might we in that situation get them on two attractions? Oh, because we want to recover it and then also
Yes.
create that wow moment to exceed that moment. So then we start training those mindsets from there. Then I think it also comes to in determining what the concern is for that guest. Was it a monetary concern where a guest purchased something and it didn't work out? Hey, I purchased your express queue ticket program, but all the wait times in the park were 5 minutes, so I didn't even use it. Was it a monetary concern? Was it a time concern that impacted their day? Was it an experience concern? Hey, we were told that this would offer this, this, and this, and we didn't feel it for these reasons. Or is it some impact or connection of the three? Because once you start having the understanding of what to do, how to do it, and why to do it, and then you start understanding the different dynamics of those service impacts, then you can start effectively plugging and playing that for any scenario that comes up. So if a guest had a money concern or a concern related to like a monetary purchase, maybe offering to make up their time isn't going to be right. Maybe you need to look at effective ways for that. If they had a time concern, maybe just blatantly throwing a gift card of X amount of dollars, maybe they don't feel felt because they don't want to buy something. They want to get on the ride. And then
Yes.
also, too, I think developing whether your recovery strategy is going to be around soft cost or hard cost. Hard cost mainly being a refund of the product, soft cost, looking at adding value, adding enhancements, dining options, things of that nature. Then you really start allowing your team to get effective and empowered with it. Because if you teach them what to look for, to ask probing questions of the guest, to really evaluate the situation, not necessarily what the guest is saying, or the frustrated emotions they may be showing in the moment, but really look at what they're saying, you can determine the strategy and what you're going to do for any particular situation right there. And I think those are some key effective things, is to really allow them to see it all in the moment before putting them out there, and really allow them to see the live operation while training, to really build up and understand, okay, this is what we can do, but what does that mean?
Yeah, I think if I'm hearing you correctly, in the event that it's monetary, how do you create more value for that customer? In the event
Exactly.
that it's time, how do you create a time value for them? Like how do you increase the value of what their concern is?
Exactly. Because obviously that concern is the main attractor or detractor that is bringing them to guest services.
Yeah.
I am not having the right day, and it is because of this specific concern. Okay, is that concern a monetary impact? Is it a time impact? And from there, you can really best strategize what is going to be right for that guest. So they may come in pointing a finger at you, but by the end, they're shaking your hand and patting you on the back and saying, "Hey, this is fantastic. Thank you so much."
Yeah. You know what? I just thought of an idea.
Yeah.
We got to turn them into turnaround artists, right? Like
Yep.
your team has to be, because you're right. You can take, I mean, even with my team that supports parks, oftentimes we're the lifeline for them if something's going wrong with what they're doing in using our systems. But what's interesting to me about this is, it really should be looked at as the guest is kind of looking for a lifeline, right? They're looking for a problem to be solved, and maybe
Yep.
that's the mindset. Yo, we solve it, right? Like I love that
Exactly.
idea. I mean, I,
Exactly.
I love
You
that
know, it's
idea.
Yeah, it's really true because, it goes with the old adage, right? If people have a positive experience, they'll tell 6 people about it. If they had a negative experience, they'll tell 11. Well, that's completely changed and compounded with social media and just the fast moving way that we can get our information out there. So providing those opportunities to really resolve it, you can turn those guests that may have been a detractor to your business into a loyal visitor that'll come back over and over again and will promote the business over and over again, which is what we all want.
Right. And those moments that do seem like conflict can easily turn into a magical moment, right? It doesn't always
Absolutely.
have to be a negative thing. And I think that's like part of where, like you're saying, developing the team comes in, is really helping them have the tools that they need. I worked for the park a while back, and one of the things I really appreciated about what they did is they had like 5 things that everyone was taught that they could use in the event that a customer came to them with a concern. So they had like 5 tools, like, they could give a free Dippin' Dots one day, or, whatever that looked like. But they had 5 tools that they had available to them that they could use. Because as you know, like sometimes, I mean, I was just, like I said, I was just at Elitch's yesterday. I mean, sometimes they don't have the attendant doesn't have a lot of control over what can be done in terms of
Exactly.
creating guest satisfaction. But if we give them some tools, maybe they're armed and they can manage that and be empowered in that moment to take care of that customer's concerns. I think that's one technique. Would you have any other techniques that could be used similar to that? Because not everybody is going to be is going to be in a management or supervisor role. Is there something that we can do for the staff that maybe doesn't have a decision-making power with regards to that, but still might be able to handle that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it could be things as simple as if a guest asks a question, even if it's, you don't know the answer, I'm not sure of that. Let me find out very quickly, right? Even little service touch points like that. Hey, how do I upgrade my ticket? I don't have the answer. Let me find out very quickly and I'll come back. Whether you need to
Yeah.
run back of house and check with someone just to get that answer. Let's see if I have that in stock. Or if you need to direct them, let's say, oh yeah, you can do that over at our ticketing office. Maybe it's that simple service of walking that guest over. Not leaving them hanging and just being like, oh yeah, if you just go down that way, just keep going. It's the third door on your right. Huh. Okay. Yeah. Maybe I'll find it. Maybe I won't. Maybe because I don't want to go down there, I'm not going to upgrade my ticket. Taking that opportunity to just walk down, create that conversation with that guest might ensure that sale that may have or may not have happened. In service moments, I think it's important for management to provide their team with a direction of what they can provide compensation wise. I know in a lot of organizations I've worked at, any team member, employee, if they see a guest that drops, their popcorn or their ice cream, they're empowered to resolve it for the guest right there. A little moment, a little act like an ice cream, it's going to take 2 seconds for that team member to get, but it's going to create that lasting memory. Wow, that was fantastic. There was a time I was walking and I saw a kid drop a little figurine toy that he had, dropped it, it bounced on the ground, went right down the drain. Team
Oh,
member, yeah, it was, I mean, you couldn't have coordinated it. You could have done that 1,000 times and it wouldn't have happened. And the kid and his family are just standing there like, wow, that just happened. Team member saw it, walked up, was able to recover it. They got him like, a toy that was, under $10 or $15. Not the park's fault at all, not the organization's fault at all, but just seeing those little moments, that's going to be something they carry with them forever. I was like, wow, that was really cool that they did that for them, So I think it's important for management to set that baseline of recovery. What can we do? Maybe it's, what, at your FEC, you can compensate up to 25 or 50 tickets if a guest says that their tickets didn't print out. It can be, yeah, you can get the guest a refill if they spill their items. It can be little things like that. But I think it's important to not only develop those guidelines, but to make sure that the team is aware of them. Because again, even when we say yes, as a team member, you can do anything you need to help the guest. Okay, that's great. I can do anything to help the guest. What does that mean? Like until we actually see it in practice or really get that confirmation of practice, hearing, yeah, you can do anything, and then hitting the button to provide that refund or going that extra mile that's going to give them tickets to come back might be a little intimidating for our team. And, in those moments, providing that and setting those guidelines, it really establishes confidence and empowerment in the team. So I think by doing that and setting those guidelines and being open and communicating with your team the end goals, the empowerment will come confidently, and they'll be able to move forward without nerves or hesitation of doing something wrong or not being in line, because ultimately our goal is to be in line with service.
Right. And it actually you just reminded me of an experience that so my children, my husband and I were long time season pass holders at the Legoland Park in Southern California. We have a little place in
Yeah.
Carlsbad, and the little figurines that they have on their name tags. I mean, the kids love trading them, but also I can't tell you how many times they were gifted them in the event that like one of the ride operators saw that the kid was upset about something, and I've seen this with other families, but just something so simple as that gave that team a tool at their disposal at any time to make a guest happy. And even all these years later, my kids are older now, so now they want me to take them to Universal and Six Flags. We still go to Legoland. It's nostalgic to them, but for those people who have young children that are going to these parks, I know that those are things that the children remember fondly, but don't realize that in those moments that attendant actually gave them that figurine because they saw that they were upset, or the little, I don't know what they
Yep.
call them, the Lego. But what an easy tool to give your team, right? Like that is so well thought
Absolutely.
out and executed, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And every time they see that little figurine, if they have it on their counter at home, it brings them right back to their memory at your park, and it creates that loyal fan base. So yeah, I agree. It's a great tool that they have.
Yeah, that's and I didn't even occur to me till this moment that that's actually probably by design, right?
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
strategy that they have. Because I just thought, well, this person is so nice, and they are, right? But working in the industry, we're recognizing that there are some really great strategies out there. Well, I have a couple of other questions for you because
Of course.
I want to touch a little bit on the technology and the benefits and the gaps that technology creates in the guest experience. And I'm wondering if you can maybe elaborate on what technology is doing to enhance this experience, but also maybe where we find some gaps, and if you have those gaps, maybe what some of those where those strategies could fill that.
Yeah. So, technology has obviously played a pivotal role in the attractions industry. We've all seen the immersion that comes obviously with the attractions, but also too with the apps and the user interfaces that we have to really take the experience and enhance it through our phones, for example. And that's added a great benefit, right? Simple
Sure.
things like checking park wait times to uploading my tickets to my phone, purchasing enhancements, ordering food and beverage options through the phone, checking in for virtual queues. All of those things have been great, but obviously they come with a lot of challenges too, because one, you have to educate the masses on how to use that information. So you have to make sure that your user interface is really streamlined and developed effectively with a proper FAQ and help system there. But it also, in a way, can remove you from that experience because you are constantly tied in certain aspects to your phone. So by needing to constantly check in for different experiences or review times, or even little things like games and stuff, which can add to the enhancement, can also take you out of that immersive experience because again, you're on your phone getting notifications and
Yes.
check-ins. There's also the tech delays when sites or apps go down, when you're relying on that information, and okay, well, the app is temporarily down, but my room key is attached to the app for this hotel room. So now it's creating an additional pinch point there, and it's one of those things that goes back to when you're looking at recovery, is it the fault of your organization if you need to recover that situation? Or is it an occurrence from outside? Usually it's going to be, the concern that you have to recover experience aspect, which a lot of times that in my experience with it being a tech concern, the recovery that worked the best for those scenarios was time because of the time impact and everything. But, a lot of times too, making sure that your team was aware not only of the park's policies and procedures, but making sure that every guest facing employee knew how to use your app, because a guest might come up and be like, hey, how do I upload my annual pass on here? If they don't know, it creates an additional pain point, because now we have to find someone. Or even if I walk you down to guest services to help, okay, no, that's great. I just need you to show me, because you work here, you are an employee, you represent the company. So the interpretation could be, why don't you know this product? As we all know, there can be very complex at times. But making sure that your team knows how to navigate it and answer questions as well is another hurdle, because it's an additional aspect of the business that you need to train. And you need to also train that with a service mindset, that everyone you speak with is not going to be the same, from a tech understanding background, language background, familiarity, attitudes, emotions, you name it. So, it definitely can create a lot of challenges, but obviously, in my opinion, I think that the good that it brings definitely outweighs the bad.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I've had a couple guests on here. We were talking about, these guest enhancement tools that we can use that are through technology. But really, what I've heard over and over again, and even what I've seen from my experience, is that you've got to have a well thought out strategy. And it does go beyond just the tech stack. It goes to the team. The team has to know how to use it in order to guide a customer through it, or guest through it, because the reality is you are going to be dealing with different people with different skill sets when it comes to the technology. What makes sense to one guest and one customer may not make sense to another, simply because of not everyone has the same usage. I mean, this next generation is going to be pretty easy because everything's being done. I mean, all,
exactly.
All the schooling, everything's being done. I can't even get my kids off the computer, and oftentimes I've got to ask them for help. But I do think it's important to know that if you are leveraging technology as part of your customer service strategy, it is well thought out, because the worst thing that can happen is a guest goes into your app where maybe they can ask a question and the app says go to guest services. To me, that's not a well thought out strategy. And now you just frustrated the customer.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And it drove traffic away that could have been there for, other reasons, when you could have provided that answer there, or, you could have utilized a chatbot type opportunity as well to provide, a basic macro response to, a majority of situations. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But on the flip side, if it's well thought out, it can be an incredible tool, answer that customer's or that guest's question, and they can move on with their day. And they just had this amazing experience where they're empowered. They got the information that they needed. They didn't have to go to guest services, wait in that line. And they can move on with their journey throughout the attraction and continue to make the best use of their day. I'm curious, Dave, if you can share your thoughts on timeless nostalgia of attractions and how this influences guest expectations. I guess what I'm trying to say is, what kind of impact? I'm trying to think of the right way to ask this, because this is such a huge topic for parks. And I think we did touch a little bit on this, how we can turn around a guest experience and create that timeless nostalgia that they have. That child that lost his toy, you gave him another toy. He's not going to remember the lost toy at that point.
Right.
But, from your opinion, how much do these things have an impact on the overall guest expectations?
I think that they definitely play a part on the guest expectation too. I think they impact a lot of the wow factor of it, beyond the guest expectation, because in those little moments, I think beyond what the guest is really even expecting you to do, like in that situation, with the toy. Or another example that I'll speak of, we had a guest at one of the places that I worked that lost their stuffed animal. And she had posted on the annual pass holder page, hey, has anybody seen this stuffed animal? My daughter lost it. We're flying back to England. It wound up in our lost and found department, and we had it, and we could have sent it back to the guest, which we did, of course. I'm not saying we didn't. But prior to that, we got an I'm celebrating button for the stuffed animal, put the pin on it that said I'm celebrating going home, took pictures of the stuffed animal around the park on various attractions, posted a picture to that social media post and said, oh, hey, we have your Scruffy, which was the name of the bear. He wasn't lost. He just wasn't ready to come home yet. And then posted the pictures of that. Sent the bear back, free of charge. That guest is going to remember that always. And the guest, would have just appreciated it and we sent it back. But to really create that story for the child, that was worried that they had lost their Scruffy, and be like, no, he was having fun. He was riding, the roller coasters and experiencing the rides and eating. I think we even had to pose with like a churro or something like that. Just to kind of change the overall experience of, when she lost her Scruffy, to the fact that no, he was just enjoying the time and he's home safe and sound. That guest is always going to remember that. Right.
Yeah.
And little wow moments that go across the attractions industry that, I'm sure people listening or, people that might hear this later on probably have a million stories where they've seen that happen as well. I think that creates such an opportunity to show the guests that they matter, and they matter more beyond, we love, let's look at it in attractions. We're one of the few industries that has guests. We don't have customers per se.
Sure.
We have guests that come to our business, and this allows us to highlight, hey, that's not just a buzzword that we train people to say. You're here. We want to take care of you. And from the timeless aspect of that, people have always loved, entertainment, right? Escaping the realities of the real world, regardless of what era they were in. And I think that the core reason for that, if you look through that, is again, that memory that it creates, right? That escapism, that altered moment of reality that allows them to have fun and be carefree. And I think, as operators and as service providers, we have the opportunity in every single interaction to potentially make that happen to someone. That's what's so exciting about it.
Yeah, I love that example. That is such a cool story because, not only did that make a huge difference, I'm sure, to that guest who, look, my daughter had a little bunny rabbit that we used to, that she used to carry around with her too. And I have to say, one time the dog bit the tail off. And we had two in case we lost one. We would switch them out. But the dog bit the tail off of one of them, so we had to get rid of the one that still had the tail because we couldn't do that illusion anymore. So you just reminded me of that memory. It's a fun memory for me, but my husband and I always laugh. We're like, that didn't work. But I understand, when a child loses something like that, I think it'd be devastating to them, especially if they're attached to it. And what you all did was not only create an experience for that family after they left, but also if you were posting, I don't know if they posted it on social media, because you mentioned it was posted in the season pass holder group, but you created an experience for other people that showed them that you cared and that they're in good hands, and that their families' interests and experiences were in good hands. This audience that we're speaking to today, these are mostly the business of attractions, right? So I love that example because, if we can just speak a little bit to the fact that you also turned it maybe even to a marketing moment, right? I know that was not probably what was happening, but at the same time, hey, it's a marketing moment. I'm sure marketing loved you guys at that moment for doing something like that, because it's important, right? It's important that we tell the story. A lot of why people visit businesses is because they know and love them, right? So I just thought that was the coolest. That's one of the favorite stories I've heard so far.
And that was a fun day at work for sure.
Yeah, I bet. I would have liked to have been the person who got to take that stuffy around the park. Well, Dave, thank you so much for sharing so much information with us. And I can tell that you are a wealth of knowledge when it comes to customer service and the ways that we can turn around experiences for guests. Any final thoughts that you want to leave with the audience? Is there anything that you think that maybe you can share with them that would just make a world of a difference for those that are trying to create that stuffy experience that you just mentioned for their guests?
Yeah, one final thought, and this was something I always tried to ingrain in my teams as well, especially when it comes to recovery. Don't try to protect the nickel and lose the dollar.
Yeah.
In certain moments, especially when it comes to soft cost recovery, potentially adding enhancements to their day, uh, food and beverage voucher, or maybe expedited access onto an attraction or into an experience or something like that. Um, while they might have a cost associated with them, a lot of times the internal cost is different than the cost to our guests. Uh, so really look at situations as a whole. I'll give one last example. I had a situation where guests had purchased an expedited queue pass. They only used it at 2 rides that day. One was an e-ticket, like large attraction. The other was a family attraction. The guests had been season pass holders for 4 years, were staying on property at a hotel, avid fans of, the location that we were at. And I had a team member that was hung up on refunding that expedited ticket process because they had used it. And technically it does say, non-refundable if used. But looking at the bigger picture, I have a loyal guest here who has a legitimate, hey, I didn't really use this product. Let me go ahead and take care of them, because again, it's going to pay off in spades in the future. And, protecting the nickel in that moment, you're going to potentially lose the dollar because, wow, I've spent all this time, money, and loyalty promoting it, and you're not going to take care of me in a pretty legitimate concern. So absolutely, that would be my last thing. Don't protect the nickel and then lose the dollar. There's nothing wrong, obviously, with saying we're in business to create a fair and reasonable profit. But utilize that mindset when you go into service, and really make sure that your team is focused on providing that effective, empowered service. It really matters, and it stands out, especially in the attractions industry. So
Yeah.
I want to thank you again for giving me the opportunity to be here. This was fantastic. It was a pleasure getting to know you more.
It was a pleasure getting to know you.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure we could continue talking about this for hours. That's what I love about this live format is we could go for hours because there's so much that we can share with people that will help them be better at what they do. And really, that's the intention of this live show, is just to empower these attractions with information that maybe they haven't thought about. I've been so fortunate to work with so many parks over the years and see the different things that are being implemented, some better than others, right? But what I love about what you're saying, because marketing is one of my backgrounds, and at the end of the day, a bad review can cost you more than a dipping dot, free dipping dot, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Let's be real. That's the truth, and we have to think about how we are create, this turnaround that you are mentioning, or what do you haven't I like the name that you have for it. It's not a turnaround, it's the recovery of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a small price to pay for a big win.
100%. 100%. And most times that's going to be true. And you document things, and you document feedback to make sure that if it becomes a trend with the same individual, you have your tools and resources to know when to stop that. But majority of the times it's not the case. Majority of times it's someone that wants that opportunity to turn their experience around, and we have that power in our hands.
I love that. Well, Dave, how can, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, or if somebody wants to ask, I don't know if you're open for questions, but I'm sure, I'm sure that there might be some following this interview. What's the best way for someone to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so the best way to get a hold of me would be through my LinkedIn profile. Pretty unique name, so there shouldn't be too many profiles to filter through. But you can reach out to me on there, send me a message, and I would be happy to discuss service and anything related to the guest experience. So this is a true joy of mine. So again, this has been a phenomenal experience.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you sharing your thoughts and insights with everyone here today, and what you're doing to make the experience for people all over the world better. I love this industry for that reason, because it's just smiles on faces and memories being made. I mean, I can't think of a better way to spend. If you've got to work a job, I can't think of a better way to live our lives out is in this industry. I feel so lucky and blessed to be in it, and
Absolutely.
to be able to meet people like you. So thank you again.
Yes, absolutely. My pleasure. It was a pleasure. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care. Well, wasn't he great? That was just an amazing conversation. And I think that there's a lot of insights there that we can use to better the guest experience, to turn around or recover a situation. And, if you have information like Dave that you want to share on this show, because we're always looking for guests or people who are interested in sharing their insights and helping us improve the industry, or maybe just sharing what you're doing because it's being done in the industry. I mean, we're not trying to necessarily always reinvent the wheel, but sometimes we just need access to information, because the more we know, the better we can do, right? More you do better. And if you are someone who has information or insights that can help attractions do better at what they do, creating the memories, putting smiles on faces, I just want to invite you to join me on the show. Be a guest on the show. Come and share your information. Tell us stories that will help improve the experience, and maybe even give people ideas on how they can be better at the jobs that they're doing within the organizations that we're working with. I really love the opportunity that I have to talk to guests and the people that I get to meet. I just am having a blast doing this. So I hope you guys appreciate that and enjoy the content that we're sharing. And like I said, would love to have you on the show and share your experience. If you're watching this on replay or on one, or listening to this on one of the podcast networks, please just drop us a line. Let us know how you enjoyed the show. I'd love to hear. Visit Dave on his LinkedIn and let him know that you enjoyed this show, and thank him for being here today. And I hope you all have a lovely rest of your week. Thank you for joining me today on this live show.